Hello again, fight fans. I'm Michael Montero from Boxing Monthly. You're watching the Neutral Corner for the week of December 10th. Lots of boxing going on this week. This is going to be a jam-packed episode, but real quick, I told you guys about my article on Jojo Diaz in last week's show in this issue, the latest issue of Boxing Monthly, but I just put up an associated video that goes along with this article on my channel. So be sure to check that out. It's an in-depth interview with Jojo Diaz in the gym. You see some training footage with him and his dad spliced in with some of the interview me and him did. Check that out, but let's get into some news and notes. So unfortunately, we're going to start this episode off with some sad news. This past weekend on Saturday the 3rd, undefeated American prospect out of Chicago, Ed Brown. He was 20-0, 16 knockouts. Just had a fight last month, I believe, in Philadelphia. Good-looking prospect, kid with a ton of potential, was shot along with a female companion, and he died as a result of the wounds he suffered there. Senseless violence takes a young life with so much potential. And look, this boxing thing is a true brotherhood. It's a true, family. And it's just sad when anybody goes like this. We see too many fighters die because of injuries they suffer in the ring. Well, here's a kid with a ton of potential that, suffered because of senseless stupidity outside of it. So just really, really sad news out of Chicago. And, that city is a very wealthy, very nice, very clean city, but the politicians there, including the current president of the United States, going back to when he was part of that establishment there, just done a poor job managing the violence in that city. It's really centered in one little place. The rest of the city is very safe, but in this one little place, a lot's happening there, and it's just sad that somebody in the boxing fraternity joins the long list of trouble that city's going through right now. But one thing I didn't talk about from last week with all the craziness and everything I had going on, I forgot to mention that George Groves, in his win over in the UK a week ago, over Eduard Gutknecht. Gutknecht he collapsed after the fight, and he's still in a coma. So we don't know, I don't know the latest, I haven't heard anything. As far as I know, he's still in that coma at the time I'm recording this. Groves has handled this situation with a ton of class. He actually set up a fund to aid his family in medical expenses. I will put a link to that below in the comment section. So look for that as one of the first comments. I'll put a link to that. So you guys can check that out. Anything you can give, again, this thing is a fraternity, right? This thing is a brotherhood. It's a sisterhood too, ladies. It's when I say brotherhood, that includes everybody. But we really are like a family. So I'm going to put a link to that below where you can help out. Really, really classy of George Groves to set that up. And, I haven't seen that fight yet, full disclosure. Haven't seen that fight, so I can't say. But I want to check it out. And I want to see how Gutknecht's corner handled that situation and how the ref handled that situation, because they might need to be held accountable. There might need to be punishment if they didn't do their job and stop the fight earlier than they should have. We've seen too many fights going way, way back in boxing where they're one-sided beatdowns and the fight should have been stopped. Now, for the record, I don't know if that was the situation here. Again, I haven't seen the fight. I will go back and watch it and talk about that later on. But, okay, enough with the sad news. I'll get on, maybe one more sad note. Miguel Cotto, it's rumored he will be fighting James Kirkland next February 25th. They are discussing either in New York or possibly in Florida, where Cotto has a home, I think in the Orlando, Florida area. So they're tossing those two locations around. Texas is not being explored, and that's, of course, is where Kirkland's from. This will be pay-per-view, and James Kirkland has looked horrible, and he's pretty much become an opponent. He's almost become the Ricardo Mayorga of this generation, not in the sense of his personality, but he's just being he's turned into kind of a setup guy for people to look good against and score a devastating knockout against. And I think that for Cotto, I don't know, at this stage of his career, does he get a devastating knockout over Kirkland? Probably not. But it probably turns into a one-sided thrashing where Kirkland's going to get some money, but just get systematically beat down by Miguel Cotto. And of course, this shouldn't be pay-per-view, but for Rock Nation to pay him to cover his financial demands because of that guaranteed contract they have with him, and this will be the last fight in that contract, they have to go pay-per-view. Now, I can't see where HBO would want any part of this because they didn't want any part of Manny Pacquiao's last fight that shouldn't have been on pay-per-view, but they'll probably pick this one up because they know Cotto is going to do a good TV rating, or a good buy rate, I should say, because he has a built-in fan base. And maybe they dropped the ball on that Pacquiao pay-per-view because it did over 300,000 buys. So I don't know. Maybe this will be on HBO. Maybe not. Maybe it'll be independently produced. More to come on that. But it looks like it's going to be Cotto Kirkland on February 25th. A signing for one of the standouts from the Olympic team here in America in these last Rio Olympics, Shakur Stevenson, will be managed, not promoted, but managed by James Prince and Andre Ward. Of course, James Prince works with Andre Ward, and Ward, those guys work pretty much exclusively with Rock Nation. So Prince said that he's shopping for a promoter for Stevenson, but you have to believe it's going to be Rock Nation. So maybe they're just saying they're going to shop around to try to, as a negotiating tactic with the Rock Nation people. But you're being managed partially by Andre Ward. When you look at the way Andre Ward's career has progressed and where he's at right now versus where he could have been right now, I don't know that this was the best signing. But Shakur Stevenson, he was catered to by Floyd Mayweather and his promotional outfit, by Al Heyman and those guys. You figure Stevenson would have been a no-brainer with Al Heyman, but with the financial troubles they're having, maybe this signing is a further sign of that, a further indication of that, I should say. Him signing with somebody else other than Al Heyman, you figured he would have jumped right at Al Heyman. Same thing with Floyd Mayweather, though. That promotional outfit that Floyd's running isn't going well so far. It's not struggling, but it's not going well. So I don't know if I love this signing. I don't know what this does for Stevenson, but we'll see. More to come on that. Some interesting upcoming fights. So the rumor is, or actually it's not even a rumor, they've already done some press releases, some rumblings about this. Not yet set in stone, but they're saying it's about 95% done. Anthony Joshua, Vladimir Klitschko, April 29th, Wembley Stadium. Of course, Anthony Joshua has to get past his opponent this weekend. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But, man, at Wembley, this could do a massive crowd. This could be big, big business. And look, Anthony Joshua, again, we'll talk more about that fight in a second, but he should pass that. I won't even say it's a test, but he should get through that with no problems. Klitschko is, of course, supposed to fight Tyson Fury several times this year, and that fight kept getting delayed. Now he's going to be coming into that fight against AJ basically on a 1.5-year layoff. And I don't know if that's going to work for him. Maybe at this advanced stage of his career where he's been in 1 million fights, he's been fighting for 20 years now. Actually, more than that if you include the amateurs. But maybe that'll help him, that rest, or maybe he's going to be really, really rusty, and that really helps Anthony Joshua. But either way, that fight should do big business. And not just at Wembley, not just in the UK, where, of course, Anthony Joshua is a star already, a superstar. You see the fight week stuff going on with him and his fight with Molina coming up this week. He's a star, man. I just saw some of that footage from over there. But internationally, globally, especially throughout Europe, that fight's going to do big TV ratings. You think Germany, you think the Ukraine, Russia, several of the Slavic states, that's going to do a big rating. And then whether it's Showtime that picks it up over here, it's probably going to be Showtime because Klitschko is not exclusively signed to HBO as I understand it, but Joshua is with Showtime. But even if somehow HBO got it, either way, it's going to do a pretty good rating here as well. So that's a big fight, man. It really is a big, big fight. It could be a real passing of the torch to the next guy in the heavyweight division. Also, March 18th, they're talking about Tom Loeffler, the guys at K2 Promotions. They've set aside Madison Square Garden for Gennady Golovkin. That's right around St. Patrick's Day. So either way, it's going to be Gennady Golovkin March 18th in New York. They're about 90% done with Danny Jacobs. The, which sanctioning body was it? I can't remember. I think it was the WBA. Sorry, I can't think of them all at the same time. But the WBA gave them 7 days to negotiate and finally sign a fight. That 7 days is up this week. We should know something by the end of this week, concrete. If Danny Jacobs and his side ultimately back out of this fight, I think it's going to be Golovkin-Andy Lee, which would make a ton of sense for obvious reasons. Either way, Golovkin's fighting March 18th, so get your travel plans ready for New York that weekend. Should be a lot of fun. Hey, if he fights Andy Lee, might not be the best fight, but it's going to be a great atmosphere because the Irish are going to come out. They're already going to be in New York partying that weekend. They'll come over to the Garden on the 18th. So one buzzkill with that, if it is Danny Jacobs, it's probably going to be pay-per-view. And you guys know I've warned about this months ago. As soon as they started talking about this fight, I said, look, don't be surprised if Al Haymon and Danny Jacobs' side, those financial demands, push this thing to pay-per-view. I thought it could have been a pay-per-view even if it happened on December 10th like it was originally supposed to happen. I figured it was going to be pay-per-view, much like the Golovkin-Lemieux situation, but worse, right? Even more egregious because, at this point, there's just been too many pay-per-views this year. But if it does go to pay-per-view, it would probably be it won't be the first pay-per-view of the year because of Cotto Kirkland. So there you go. Maybe 2017 is going to be more of the pay-per-view bullshit. That's enough of the news and notes now. Let's get into the review of last week's action. Starting with last Friday, December 2nd in Moscow, Denis Shafikov scores a split decision win over Richard Commey. Shafikov's a Russian. Commey is originally from Ghana. And Shafikov won by the scores of 116-112, 115-113, and one judge had it for Commey, 116-112. Shafikov is now 38-2-1 with 20 knockouts. Commey drops to 24-2 with 22 knockouts. For Richard Commey, let's stay with him. He actually lost last September, to Robert Easter Jr. by split decision for the vacant IBF lightweight title. So Easter took that title. And Commey loses a split decision now in Russia. So this guy has traveled to America and lost a split decision. He's traveled to Russia now and lost a split decision. So that just shows you, man, it is hard to go on the road and win. But I think in those two fights, Richard Commey really, really proved he's one of the best lightweights in the world. I think he's a top 10 lightweight. And these two losses didn't hurt him. They actually built him up. He actually has higher value after these two split decision losses than he had before them. So going on the road, putting up good fights, losing close fights, lesson learned, guys. Not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, he's probably going to be in another big fight next year. You have to think he will be. For Shafikov, this was an IBF eliminator. So now he's going to go up against Robert Easter Jr. next year. I would expect another very, very close, controversial decision that can go either way, possibly a split decision, because these guys are all kind of at the same level. They're all good quality fighters, but none of them are a cut above. So I think that maybe there's going to be a round robin with these fighters over the next year or so. But hey, why not? These are close competitive fights. And I love that Commey is willing to travel. I think Shafikov, who's been willing to travel before, he's obviously going to have to come to America to fight Robert Easter. That should be a pretty interesting matchup. But also Friday here in the United States, in California, wasn't a very high-profile fight in terms of the fight itself, but the story of the fight was the crowd. Undefeated American prospect Jose Carlos Ramirez, who is one of our better amateurs in recent years, went to the Olympics. Over 13,500 fans showed up at the Save Mart Center, which is a little arena there in Fresno, California. It's kind of in the middle of the state, upstate from LA here. Ramirez is 19-0 with 14 knockouts now. He scored a 6th-round knockout over a Bronx fighter who's a native of Africa but now lives in the Bronx, Yusuf Kinda, 6th-round knockout. So Ramirez, this wasn't a very high-profile fight. You know, it's not like it's an HBO or Showtime fight or anything like that. It wasn't on an undercard to a big fight. But this is a big story because this guy's he's 24 years old, 5'10", 72-inch reach, 140-pound fighter, VADA certified, part of the VADA program, which, by the way, if you go on BoxRec now and look at any fighter's profile, it'll tell you in their stats if they're VADA certified. So if you have any questions about that, bam, just go to BoxRec. BoxRec, they always think of new and interesting things to add to improve to their site, man. Awesome. But for Ramirez, he actually fought Vasyl Lomachenko in the 2011 World Championships in Baku, Azerbaijan. He lost pretty handedly, but it just shows you the fact that he went over there to the World Championships and competed. This guy, you know, he can fight. He's got some wrinkles and everything to iron out, but he's a good look-up prospect with some potential. But he's got a massive home following already. And you got to figure that one of the networks, even if it's like a Showbox or something, right? Showtime's Prospect series that they have on Friday nights, or maybe even HBO Latino or something like that, will go up there to Fresno to air one of his fights next year because he's doing those kind of crowds and he's just a prospect. I love this. We need more of this, particularly in American boxing. I think the guys over in the UK do a very good job of it. Over in Japan, in parts of Latin America, they do a very good job of it. The American promoters need to do a much better job. But building up a fan base in a fighter's hometown or home region doesn't have to be a big city. It doesn't have to be Los Angeles. It doesn't have to be New York. Fresno, California, not a very big city. It's a small town. But this fighter is from that area, and he's had most of his fights right there in that area, and they're building up a local fan base to do 13,500 people for a prospect, for a fight like this. That's awesome. And then you look at what Terence Crawford's doing in Omaha. He's going to be fighting in front of a massive hometown crowd this Saturday. We need more of this in boxing in America, and I hope that more fighters will push their promoters and their managers here to help them establish hometown fan bases. But let's move on to Saturday's action. We'll go back to Russia, back in Moscow. Denis Lebedev, Murat Gassiev fought, I think, one of the better fights of this year. I think it's a top 10 fight of this year. It's not a fight of the year candidate or anything like that, but it was a good, solid scrap. Certainly the 9th or 10th best fight of this year. And to see big guys throwing punches like this, even down to the final round, to me, when you look at the size of these fighters, the way they move and everything, it just looked like a good old heavyweight fight from the 60s. That's just the feel and the look this fight had. But it was supposed to be for 2 titles, but the WBA title was not on the line, only the IBF title. And Murat Gassiev comes away with a split decision victory by the scores of 116-111, 116-112, and a one judge hit at 114-113 for Lebedev. There is a 5th round knockdown with a great body shot, a left hand from Gassiev, who's an orthodox fighter. Lebedev is the southpaw fighter. And from that point forward, I thought a lot of what this fight was Gassiev coming forward, pressing the action. Lebedev doing a lot of backing up and a lot of huffing and puffing. Gassiev was putting a lot of pressure on Lebedev. I thought Lebedev's footwork was much better, though, than Gassiev, and he was spinning him. He was boxing really well in spots. He was starting off rounds very well, the first minute of a round or so, but Gassiev's constant pressure, his body punching, his harder punches, he's just the harder puncher of the two, would start to wear Lebedev down. And I thought, like, he gave several rounds away. The last minute of a round or so, I thought Gassiev stole some rounds because he never outworked Lebedev as far as punch output, but that pressure and the harder shots would have Lebedev backing up. It'd have him off balance. It'd have him kind of stumbling around. And a lot of times that body language sways judges. Of course, both of these fighters are Russian. Gassiev trains here in the United States up at Big Bear. He's a stablemate with Gennady Golovkin. He's trained by Abel Sanchez, but he's still Russian. So two Russian guys. So, and Lebedev was the house fighter. He's the Russian-based fighter. So a lot of people were upset about the decision and claiming robbery. And I know, I used the word robbery just a few weeks ago to talk about a very high-profile fight involving a Russian fighter. This was not the same situation, guys. This really, really, truly was a fight that could go either way. And I could see scores 114, 113 for either guy. For my money, I scored it 114, 113 for Gassiev. I just thought that he clearly did enough to take 6 rounds in the fight, and the knockdown was the difference. And that was, I watched it a couple times now and tried to give every advantage to Lebedev, but that's just how I saw it. I just reward the guy who's moving forward and who's landing the bigger, harder punches. And if you look at Lebedev's face after the fight and you look at Gassiev, you see everything you need to see right there. And I know Lebedev bruises and swells and cuts up. He's been in a ton of wars and his skin's beat up now and he cuts and everything easily. But still, man, all the punches he landed, Gassiev walked right through them. There were a few here and there that stopped him in his tracks, that got his attention. But for the most part, he walked right through them. For Lebedev, he retains his WBA title, as I said. I wouldn't mind seeing a rematch. This was a good quality scrap. And HBO is going to start investing in the cruiserweight division with Alexander Usyk. This would be one that they really should pick up. Even if it's on tape delay and they pick it up for $500,000, the rights to that would be very, very cheap. It'd be worth it for HBO to put that, if they do a rematch, I'm just saying, if they do a rematch, to put that on the air here in the United States, because it'll be another good fight. But for Lebedev, man, he's really, really running up against it. He looked really tired, was blowing a lot of air, was visibly very tired and beat up toward the end of this fight. Hung in there tough. He is a tough son of a bitch, one of the toughest guys in boxing, I think, pound for pound, and he showed it in this fight. But he's on the way out. For Gassiev, he's really still, even though he has a title right now, to me, he's another one of these fighters that is still a prospect with a world title. This was really a gut check, so actually, I'll take that back. He beat one of the best cruiserweights in recent years, so he's a contender now. He's one of the top cruiserweights, fine. But he's still a prospect in the sense of he's still got a lot of things to work out. He doesn't cut the ring off very well. He doesn't move very fluidly. I thought Lebedev had better hand speed and fluidity with his combinations. I think Gassiev squares up a little too much. And I understand that's part of his game as a stalker, but I think he could move his head more. He could throw in combination more. He could use the jab a lot more, and he needs to cut the ring off a lot better. So Abel Sanchez has a lot of things to work out with Gassiev. But here's something a lot of people don't know, and I didn't know this until this week. Gassiev only had about 20 or 30 amateur fights. So he's not very experienced. And that's why I say he's still kind of a prospect. He's still a work in progress. Abel Sanchez, needs to iron out some of these things with him. If they can, if he continues to get better, if he continues to grow, he's going to be a damn good fighter. At this stage of his career, to beat a guy like Gassiev, and even if you thought it was an even fight or a draw, or you barely had Lebedev winning, for Gassiev to do that at this stage of his career, to fight on virtually even terms, if you will, and drop Lebedev, that's really, really impressive stuff. You look at the cruiserweight division right now, Usyk has a title, Lebedev, Gassiev, Bellew, he has a title, but he's moving up to heavyweight, so I don't know what's going to happen there. But man, All these guys have to fight next year. This is a really, really good division with a lot of talent. And I think why not start it off next year with a rematch between these two? This was a good fight. I think if they fought 10 times, it'd be 10 good quality fights. Let's see it again. Also on this card, Maxim Vlaskov scores a 7th round TKO over Rakhim Chakviev. Vlasov is now 37-2 with 20 knockouts, and Chakviev falls to 26-3 with 19 knockouts. Here's what's interesting about that fight. For Vlasov, he started his career at 160 pounds as a middleweight. He dropped decisions to Isaac Chilemba and Gilberto Ramirez at light heavyweight, and now he's at cruiserweight, and he stopped Chakviev, who is a career cruiserweight, the naturally bigger, stronger guy, and has been heralded as this knockout puncher. I always thought his punching power was overrated. Remember, he had a gold medal in the 2008 Olympic Games at heavyweight. So in a sense, he's kind of been a disappointment as a pro after that. I think he was seen as somebody who was going to win titles and be one of the top guys, and he's just kind of fallen short of that. So also on that card, though, probably the upset of the year, at least a candidate, and definitely a candidate for knockout of the year. Julius Indongo scores a 1st-round knockout over Eduard Troyanovsky to take his IBF junior welterweight title. Indongo, the southpaw, is now 21-0 with 11 knockouts. The fight ended at just 2 minutes and 20 seconds into the 1st round. And Troyanovsky, now with his first professional loss, 25-1, 22 knockouts. This was one of those fights where, look, I'll admit it. I set this up as I thought this was a showcase fight for Troyanovsky. That's what I said last week. Indongo, I've never seen him. You look at his resume, I don't recognize any of those names. He's never been on the road to Russia for a big fight like this. It had all the setup of a showcase fight. But he went out there and took this fight out of the judge's hands, and he didn't let his opponent get comfortable. I thought Troyanovsky looked a little flat. His hands were down, backing straight up. And Indongo came over just with a straight left and came right over the top with it, landed it right on the button. And Troyanovsky, it hurt him, fell down. That was bad enough, but then his head, the back of his head, slammed into the canvas, and I think that really messed him up. This was an awesome performance. And it just goes to show, look, for Troyanovsky, look at his resume. Who the hell did he fight? He had a complete shit resume coming into this fight. I've never regarded him as a top junior welterweight. Never have. I think that you could argue he's in the top 10, and that's why this was an upset. But I never saw him as an elite guy because who the hell has he fought? And he had one of these titles. But for now, in Indongo, I don't know if there was a rematch clause in this or not, because to my knowledge, it wasn't a mandatory or anything. If I'm wrong about that, please correct me. But I think this was just a voluntary defense, and he went in there and got it. And now he has a title. That's awesome for him. I hope that he's smart. He uses that bargaining chip to get a good deal for himself in his next fight. If that's a rematch with Troyanovsky and he goes back to Russia, he needs to get paid. He's earned it. He earned it with that left hand. So great win for him. I do think it's one of the top upsets of the year, one of the top knockouts of the year. I just don't think it outweighs Joe Smith Jr. knocking out Andres Fonfara. Fonfara was seen as a guy whose stock continued to rise and who had fought top opposition. Lost some, but won most. Gave it down to Stevenson all he could handle. Upset Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. So for Joe Smith to come in there and knock him out, that was huge, right? This is up there, but just for me, not quite to that level. I still think that's my upset of the year, but certainly in the top 2 or 3, certainly in the top 5 knockouts of the year, I think, when you just consider all the intangibles. But, okay, let's talk about, real quickly, this fight over in the UK. Billy Joe Saunders defends his WBO middleweight title. wins a fight here by decision over Artur Akarov, the Russian who had traveled over there to the UK. The scores, 116-112, 116-113, 115-113. Billy Joe Saunders improves to 24-0, 12 knockouts. And for this fight, he struggled to make weight. He sat in his ass for a year. I talked about that last week, how it was almost a year to the day when he finally fought this guy. He had ballooned up, it was, like I said, struggled to make weight. This was a complete shit fight. Neither guy really did a whole lot. There were a lot of people out there that complained about the decision and cried robbery. I do think that the 116-112 score, a little too wide. I thought that the 115-113 score, if you were going to give it to Saunders, that was the more correct score there. But I wouldn't necessarily call this a robbery because Akarov really didn't do a whole lot either. It was a sloppy, shitty kind of fight. And ultimately, Billy Joe Saunders' stock has plummeted since that win over Eubank Jr. What was that, 2 years ago now? I think it was 2 years ago. His stock has just continued to plummet. And when you think that earlier this year, he had an opportunity to be on the co-feature, to fight in the co-feature of the Canelo Smith card in front of, what was that crowd? 53,000 fans in Texas. And if he won that fight, he was going to fight Canelo in Canelo's next fight. Now, obviously, Canelo got injured, so it would have been pushed back to 2017. But it was originally supposed to be November 26th, I believe. So Billy Joe Saunders found a way to screw himself out of that amazing opportunity to build his brand, to fight in front of 53,000 fans who had never seen him, to fight in front of millions of American fans on HBO pay-per-view that had never seen him before. And huge exposure. And then get Canelo the next time out. And now he's fighting Artur Akarov in front of, I don't know, a few hundred fans. And most, I won't say most, but a lot of people feel that this was a draw at best. Man, this guy's stock has plummeted. I talked about Nicholas Walters last week and how he has screwed himself and just destroyed his career almost in a way. Billy Joe Saunders, the same thing. The only difference is that he still holds that title. But I tell you this, based on this performance against Akarov and the performance or lack thereof over the past year of sitting on his ass, he's not going to be holding that title much longer. I will put down $1,000 right here, right now. Any takers, let me know. $1,000 says Billy Joe Saunders will not hold that damn title by this time next year. No, he's going to lose it. And if he doesn't get in there and fight a Canelo or a Golovkin, he's going to end up losing it to a second-tier opponent on another shit fight like this for low money. One thing about Edward Troyanovsky, he turned down about $500,000 to fight Terence Crawford this year. Bob Arum and Top Rank offered him, it was almost $500,000 to come over to the United States and fight Terence Crawford. He turned that down. He just fought Julius Indongo for a lot less money and got knocked the fuck out. And now that one bargaining chip he had, that IBF belt, gone. Billy Joe Saunders needs to wake up. He needs to wake up soon. Lots of boxing action this Saturday. This is truly Super Saturday, December 10th. Okay, let's start as far east as we could go. Over to New Zealand in the Vector Arena in Auckland, New Zealand. Joseph Parker going up against Andy Ruiz for the vacant WBO heavyweight title. Of course, this is the title Tyson Fury held and dropped it. Joseph Parker, 21-0, 18 knockouts. Andy Ruiz, 29-0, 19 knockouts. They are expecting a full sellout at the venue. I believe this venue seats 14,000. If I'm wrong about that, please somebody out there correct me. But here's another draw. Another hometown fighter fighting in his homeland, I should say, and doing a big crowd. Imagine that. Smart, right? I love this. I love this matchup. I think that both of these guys are prospects. Let's not get it twisted. They're prospects. But this is the kind of fight that shows who's for real, who's not, who's going to take that next step. This is a fascinating fight that we don't get enough in the heavyweight division. The winner of this fight, you got to say, is a top 5 heavyweight, right? Let's see here. As far as the size, Parker is listed as 6'4", 76-inch reach. Andy Ruiz, 6'2", 74-inch reach. I can tell you right now, in person, Andy Ruiz is not that tall. So Joseph Parker is going to be the taller, longer, bigger guy in there. And here's one of the X factors in this matchup. He's fought the better opposition already. Even though he has less fights and has been a pro for less time, Parker has 4 fights just this year in 2016 already. This will be his 5th fight. And he's got 27 rounds in those 4 fights. And he's fought several different styles. You think back to fighting Carlos Takam, who really gave him a gut check. It really pushed him a little bit. Carlos Takam is a good quality fringe contender type of heavyweight that's going to give everybody that gut check. And then he fought Alexander Dimitrenko, big, tall, long guy with experience. That fight ended weirdly, but it was Parker was on his way to knocking him out anyway before that weird kind of stoppage happened. And then you look at Ruiz. Now, Ruiz, he has had 3 fights this year. He's put in 17 rounds this year. But who has he fought? Who has he fought? That he's got a couple names on there. Former, like, Sergey Lakovich he fought, but he was shot to shit by the time Ruiz fought him. He's fought other prospects like Franklin Lawrence, guys like that, but they turned out to be suspects. He doesn't have anybody on his resume at the level that Joseph Parker does. And I know some of you guys out there have commented lately that I need to be more patriotic and talk up my American fighters more. No, that wouldn't be doing my job. I'm supposed to talk about who I think has faced the better fighters and who I think is going to win. I think Joseph Parker is going to win this fight, okay? That's just one of the X factors there. He's the bigger, stronger guy. He's fought the better fights as a pro. Not as skilled as Andy Ruiz. Andy Ruiz has better fundamentals, better hand speed, definitely faster with his combinations and more fluid and more consistent with his punches. But Parker, for everything I said before, he's also the hometown fighter here. And here's an interesting side note that I forgot to mention in my news and notes. Bob Arum just signed on to claim the promotional rights for Joseph Parker in the United States and in China. Parker's current promoter in New Zealand will continue to be his promoter there and anywhere else. But in the United States specifically, and in China specifically, Bob Arum and Top Rank, who also promote Andy Ruiz Jr., and always have, they will promote him in those countries. I find this an interesting signing. Either way, whoever wins this fight, Arum has the winner, right? At least in the United States. If it is Parker, he knows he's got a built-in star there in New Zealand, in Australia. He can put on fights there. He knows that he can bring him obviously here to America. He controls the promotional rights. But Bob Arum and Top Rank have been establishing a real market in China, in Macau. And those cards are going to continue over there. So that's obviously why he picked up the promotional rights for China. You might see a situation where Zhou Shiming defends his title over there in China, and Joseph Parker is the co-feature. New Zealand, Australia, not too far from China. I know it's not exactly close, but it's a lot closer than the United frickin' States, right? A lot of people vacation back and forth. A lot of Chinese people vacation down there. I know Chinese people who live down there, right? So there's a little bit of a little thinking ahead there by Bob Arum. Smart business. I don't think they'll have any factor on how the scorecards go. Because again, Bob Arum wins anyway here. If Andy Ruiz Jr. wins, he has a Mexican-American heavyweight titleist. He could bring him right back here to California and make a lot of money putting him, even if it's at StubHub Center or something. He could do a lot with Andy Ruiz Jr. as well. but just considering all the factors I stated, I like Parker by decision in a good heavyweight scrap. That's kind of like what we saw last week in the cruiserweight division between Lebedev and Gassiev. Okay, so let's go over to Manchester Arena in the United Kingdom, where Anthony Joshua is going up against Eduard Molina. You guys know AJ is 17-0 with 17 knockouts. Molina is 25-3 with 19 knockouts. Obviously, this is for Joshua's IBF heavyweight title. Molina is best known for taking Deontay Wilder 9 hard rounds in June of 2015. He also KO'd a completely shot Tomas Adamek this April. Good win for him, and it put himself in line to get a fight like this. I like Eduard Molina as a person. He's a hardworking guy. He's done it the hard way. He's just a scrapper, and the hard rounds he put in against Wilder made that fight entertaining, man. Make no mistake, fans are going to be looking at what AJ does against Molina and comparing that directly to Deontay Wilder, because those two guys are going to be compared until they eventually fight. So for Wilder, who had over like 30-something fights before he fought Molina, Joshua's only got 17 fights. He's fighting Molina. Do I love this matchup? Is it who I wanted to see Joshua fight? No. But at the same time, I don't mind the matchup because he's only got 17 fights. It's like I've been telling you guys. Joshua's still a prospect. Is he a top 10 heavyweight? Yeah, he's in my top 10. Yes, he holds a title. But he's still a guy who's learning on the job and ironing out some wrinkles. So this is a good fight for him. And I already talked about the fact that they've signed on to fight Klitschko next April if everything goes right this weekend. So I like this fight just fine. And I expect Anthony Joshua to score a knockout well before the 9th round to one-up Deontay Wilder. And it's going to be interesting to see what the crowd looks like because this will be the first time Joshua has fought at the Manchester Arena. I expect it to be a massive crowd, enthusiastic as always. Also, loaded undercard. Luis Concepcion defending his WBA 115-pound title. Scott Quigg is making his comeback fight after the loss to Frampton and the jaw, the injury. He's going to be at featherweight. This will be his first fight at featherweight. Dillian White and Derek Chisora. That's not a very meaningful heavyweight fight, but it's going to be a hell of a lot of fun. They've been jawing at each other. Those two guys are going to make for a fun domestic-level heavyweight fight. I'm going to be watching that shit, best believe. Callum Smith also fights there. He continues to just build himself up. And Luis Ortiz, the heavyweight, Cuban heavyweight that just fought recently against Malik Scott in one of the shittiest fights of 2016, keeping him busy. I like that because dude is probably 42, 43, 44. He needs to be busy. So really, really stacked card over there. I love the way the British promoters stack their cards, man. They know what they're doing. Now here in the United States, 2 miles from where I live at the Galen Center, that's where the University of Southern California plays their basketball games. In the main event, Jesus Cuellar is going up against Abner Mares, defending his WBA featherweight title. He won this title. He's for those of you who don't know Cuellar, he's from Argentina. He won the interim title in 2013, defended it a few times, and was bumped up to full champion in 2015. For Abner Mares, this will be his first fight back in the ring since a tough, hard-fought decision loss to Leo Santa Cruz last August. I was at that fight. It was a pretty good fight, and Abner, made a good account of himself. But that eye, he's had an eye injury for years now. It looks really, really bad. This is a 1.5-year layoff for him. I don't know how he continues to get sanctioned to fight. That eye, it's going to become a problem for him later in life. Israel Vasquez, we all remember him, one of our favorite fighters of the last generation. That eye of his, I can't remember if it was the right or the left, so forgive me, but that eye was so bad, and he kept on fighting well past when he should have fought. And I remember Freddie Roach stopped wanting to work with him because he said, this dude, he's fighting on too long, and I don't want to be a part of it. He went in and he had that 4th fight against Rafael Marquez and everything. I've met Israel several times in person in the last year or so, and he wears thick glasses. And they finally just had surgery and took the eye out. So there you go. Well, that's where Abner Mares is headed. So I hate this main event. I can't get excited for it. I don't give a shit. The fight on this card that I'm excited about is Jermall Charlo putting his IBF junior middleweight title on the line against Julian J-Rock Williams, who I believe was the mandatory. And this fight was supposed to happen 6 months ago. But the can kept getting kicked down the road. I thought it was going to get pushed all the way to 2017. I'm happy that it's happening now. Should have happened before, but it's happening now. It's a good matchup. You guys should check this one out. This is a good PBC matchup. For Charlo, he's a big junior middleweight, 6 feet tall, 73-inch reach. He beat Austin Trout. His last fight was in May, beat Austin Trout. For Julian Williams, 5'11", 72-inch reach, exciting, gets some good knockouts. The X factor here for me is he has a shit resume as far as who he's fought so far. And it's through no fault of his own. He's a prospect working his way up, but he doesn't have a signature opponent yet to really, really judge him against. This will be his biggest step up, right? And for Charlo, you could make the argument that Austin Trout was faded, well past his best, kind of going through the motions at that point in his career, but he was still a good, serviceable fighter. And for him to beat Trout, I thought he won like 8 rounds to 4, somewhere in there. I thought that was a big test for him. I was leaning toward Julian Williams by a late knockout in this fight, but just thinking about who they've fought so far, it's a tough one, man. There's part of me that says Jermall Charlo is going to win a decision, possibly disputed decision. There's part of me that says he might be ahead in the late rounds, maybe even far ahead, and J-Rock scores a knockout. Come from behind knockout. Those are the 2 scenarios I keep bouncing back and forth with. Either way, even if Charlo does get stopped late in this fight, I think he's going to be ahead, So either way, he's going to be ahead on the cards going into the championship rounds of this fight. That's all I know. Also on the other card, prospects, Sergey Lipinets and Erickson Lubin fight, and Josecito Lopez, remember him? He makes his comeback fight. The last time he fought was last March against Andre Berto, where he took a pretty bad beating, so he makes his comeback. And then in Omaha, Nebraska, I talked about Terence Crawford earlier. He's going to fight in his hometown at the CenturyLink Center against John Molina. Let's see. For Crawford, he's had a pretty good year. He beat Hank Lundy in February, looked really good in that fight. Slow start, but he got the job done and took care of business. And then against Victor Postol, boring fight, but he was very dominant. And he unified titles and became the ring champion at 140 pounds. He's the man in that division. Now, John Molina, 5-5 in his last 10 from 2012 to now. He's been KO'd twice. But in June, he thoroughly outboxed Ruslan Provodnikov to earn this fight. And he always brings it. John Molina is always in exciting fights. So I like this fight. At first I didn't love it when it was announced and a lot of people were kind of groaning. But it's in Terence Crawford's hometown. Another sellout crowd there in Omaha. An exciting opponent that's going to bring it to him and give Crawford chances to stop him and look good. This is the kind of matchup that builds a guy up even further. And, Terence Crawford, after that great 2014, I thought a lot of momentum left in 2015. He had a disappointing year. He only fought twice. 2016, look, if he goes out and gets a stoppage against Molina, which I favor him to do, I think he's going to get the knockout. I think that criticism from the Postol fight, for a lot of people that felt he should have went for the knockout late against Postol, I think he heard those critics. I think he's going to take it out on Molina. He gets a knockout here. That's 3 fights this year, collecting titles, becoming the man in the division. His first pay-per-view, even though it was a flop, he got that out of the way. Very productive year for Terence Crawford if he looks dominant and is entertaining and gets a stoppage in this fight. In the co-feature of that card, Mason Menard, who is an American prospect who's 32-1, 24 knockouts, 28 years old, 5'6", 67-inch reach, going up against Raimundo Beltran, who you guys probably remember was one of Manny Pacquiao's key sparring partners for years. Beltran's been a pro since 1999, started as a featherweight. He actually fought Terence Crawford in 2014, at the end of 2014, and went 12 hard rounds with Terence Crawford. So this is a tough, scrappy fighter. Another one of these guys that's carved out a real good career for himself, you know, just by doing it the old-fashioned way. And I love that. 31-7-1 with 19 knockouts. He's 35 years old. He's actually the taller guy. Even though he started as a featherweight, he's 5'8", 67-inch reach. So he's going to be taller and longer than Mason Menard. Based on styles, if you haven't seen Menard yet, he fought on Showbox, I think, once or twice, and had some exciting fights where he got some exciting knockout wins. He seems to be a power puncher, and one of these guys that I think he's 140 pounds, might have a future. You know, he's got some definite skills and everything. You know, definitely has to work on some stuff, but Beltran's going to come right to him and give him a real gut check. So I love this matchup. If you get a chance to see it, check it out. We're going to find out if Mason Menard is a possible contender or a pretender. But that's it, man. Loaded episode. I will put timestamps below. So look for that. Like, share, subscribe. I'll see you guys at the fights.